So I want to invite everyone to grab a seat, and we'll be getting started. We still have a few spots up front too, and a few other spots scattered through the room, but I really appreciate so many people being here this afternoon. My name is Harry Webney-Behrman. I work on campus in the Office of Human Resource Development, and it's been my privilege the last 2.5 years to be involved with the HR design project as the lead of what we call the collaboration team. The role of the collaboration team throughout this process has been to try to facilitate opportunities for meaningful input and feedback throughout the process, and to make sure that the campus is fully informed and engaged as we move towards the ultimate implementation of this new HR system. Today is one of a whole series of updates that we've been doing throughout the process as we've been moving along. For those of you, how many of you have been with us from the start of this project? Yeah, a good number of you. Wow. So as those of you who've been involved since the beginning of the project in late 2011 will know, what we've been trying to do is create opportunities throughout the campus for people to be able to provide useful and timely input throughout. So that manifested itself early on in terms of the formation of work teams. It then represented a number of different opportunities for input that people were providing as to the questions that those work teams were dealing with. And then as the plan was developed, ultimately feedback regarding the plan, and then commentary through different governance processes by which people are able to have governance review, which continues to this day. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Bob Lavigna, the head of the Office of Human Resources and the lead on this project. I also want to welcome everyone who is participating through the live streaming that's going on across the campus this afternoon, and also to let not only those folks know, but all of you know that the PowerPoint presentation that is going to be covered is also available on the HR Design website, hrdesign.wisc.edu. So it's available for people to be able to download and follow along, or otherwise later to download and be able to share with one another. The process that we're going to use this afternoon is one where Bob's going to provide the update to where we are in the project. After that, I will then be seeking questions and comments from people. Actually, we will also be inviting Terry Fritter, who's representing the Classified Staff Executive Committee, to be able to make some comments about the importance of that governance process in this whole project. So we will be doing Q&A and comments. A number of you may have picked up yellow cards on the way in. That's real important for being able to jot down those comments. We'll collect those as Bob completes his comments. It's also going to be possible through another one of these microphones to be able to pose a question from the floor as well. So we'll get questions from you in any event, but all of the questions, all of the comments are really important, and we invite you to make those as we move forward this afternoon. At the conclusion of the afternoon, we also ask that you take a moment to answer the 6-question survey that you've all been given, that you should have received coming into the room, and to drop your responses in the box that's in the back of the room. So that's also really important feedback so that we're clear about what you're understanding as a result of this update, what is meaningful to you, what else we need to be providing, and what it is. Sure. It's one or the other. Okay, now we know. So that as a result of that feedback, we're really able to understand what was most useful and where we can improve future presentations related to this project. So without any further ado, I just want to say one more thing, I guess, Bob, which is that it has been important throughout this project that we work at this as a community, as a campus community, really trying to engage in conversations about the opportunity to create our own HR system that are meaningful and respectful. I'm pleased that we've been able to do that over the last couple of years, and encourage us to continue to interact with one another in that spirit this afternoon. Thanks. So with that, Bob?
Thanks, Harry. Good afternoon, everyone. How's the volume in the back, okay? Good, okay. Well, thank you very much for being here today. I know everyone's very busy, and we're really gratified by the turnout today. It shows, once again, that there's a great deal of interest in HR design as we move forward. And it really has been a journey that we've been at for more than 2 years now. And clearly, and we'll talk a lot about this afternoon, we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. As Harry said, we have been doing these sessions on a regular basis, just about every 3 months. But we did not do one in the spring. The last one we did was in November, because we really didn't have a whole lot new to talk about, and I didn't want to get up in front of a couple hundred people and say the same thing that we had said 3 months earlier. So we did some other communication through Inside UW-Madison and using a couple of other media to alert everyone to where we were in the process. But today, we really do have a lot to talk about, including some detail on the approval that we received a couple of months ago by the Joint Committee on Employment Relations. And actually, it was 1 year to the day that Joker approved us from when it decided to delay the implementation of HR design. So there's some symbolism to that, but we now have the approval of the Joint Committee on Employment Relations. So we want to go through, and I'll try to do this as concisely as possible to leave as much time as possible for questions. And any questions that you ask that we don't have time to respond to during the presentations, we'll do what we've done in the past, which is we'll respond after the session. So talk a little bit about what we have accomplished since November, with a particular focus on the approval by the Joint Committee on Employment Relations, Joker. Talk about how we're moving forward, some highlights on what we've been doing since November on several components of HR design, and then provide you with some key takeaways, and then, of course, we'll have questions and answers. So what have we been doing on the HR design project initiative since November? We've actually done quite a bit. I'll talk a little bit more about Joker approval, but we did get, in April, approval by the Joint Committee on Employment Relations to implement those components of HR design that required Joker approval effective July 1st, 2015. So while Joker did not change the effective date, which was initially a 2-year delay, it did give us approval. So that really was the last external hurdle that we had to go through in order to proceed to implementation. And I know there were some people, probably a few of you in this room, who felt that after Joker delayed us 2 years, that we might never get its approval. So we're very, very happy and gratified that we got approval. We continue to consult regularly with governance bodies, including our Shared Governance Advisory Group, which has representatives from all of the governance bodies, the Faculty Senate, the Academic Staff Assembly, and the newly formed Classified Service Group, which I think is being called the Congress. Classified Staff Executive Committee, that's the group of leaders, University Committee. We've also begun to roll out some policies that will form the foundation for the new HR system. The first among these, and I'll talk a little bit more detail about them, are policies around new employee onboarding and performance management. And these are, as all of what we're doing continues to be, directly from the HR Design Strategic Plan, which, as many of you recall because you were involved in developing it, we put together using a group of 11 work teams consisting of about 150 of our colleagues from across the campus. We had an advisory board, which also consisted of representatives from labor organizations as well as governance and other stakeholder groups. Then we took the strategic plan to the campus community, got approval from the governance bodies, and then took it to the Board of Regents and got Board of Regents approval. So that continues to be, and will continue to be, the basis, the foundation for this new HR system, including our onboarding and performance management policies. We've also began to work on expanding our professional development and training programs through the Office of Human Resource Development to support HR design. And our particular focus initially is on improving professional education and training for managers and supervisors, because much of what we'll be rolling out is going to require that our managers and supervisors understand their roles and have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to perform those roles, including in areas like onboarding and performance management. What else have we done? Continued progress on creating a new system for recruitment, assessment, and selection. This is particularly relevant for classified employees because as of July 1st, 2015, now that we have Joker's approval, we will need to create an entirely new hiring system for classified employees, which as of July 1st, 2015, will become university employees. This gives us really, I think it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to design a hiring system that meets the needs of a world-class university. So we'll be out of the classified hiring process. We'll still have a hiring system that's based on qualifications, based on merit, that is really essentially based on civil service principles, but we can design it to meet our needs in a way that is much more timely and efficient and effective. Continue to evaluate applicant tracking system options. An applicant tracking system is the online system that we will need to put into place to accept applications, assess candidates, and then produce the list of qualified candidates for hiring managers. Right now on the classified side, we use Whisk Jobs, which is the state system, which really, again, doesn't meet our needs. On the unclassified side, we don't have an applicant tracking system. We're doing it with paper and Excel spreadsheets and a whole bunch of different ways. So what we need is an integrated online system that is user-friendly, that job candidates can apply through, we can track candidate progress, and we can produce lists of qualified candidates for hiring managers. So right now we're going through a process of evaluating various options that exist that we can adapt and then adopt at the university. We're beginning to work on, again, this is something right out of the HR Design Strategic Plan, a workplace flexibility toolkit. We're looking across the university, we're sort of inventorying what divisions and departments are doing right now with respect to workplace flexibility, and then we will turn that into a toolkit, a policy that also will allow us to educate the entire campus on what the options are and what employees have to do to take advantage in a good way of those options. We're also beginning to work on an HR metrics dashboard starting internally within the Office of Human Resources to come up with a set of metrics so that we internally in OHR and also across the campus can report on a regular basis on how successful we are in attracting, developing, and retaining talent. We also completed an OHR organizational assessment. This was also one of the promises we made in the HR Design Strategic Plan, that we would look internally within the Office of Human Resources, review our capability, review our organizational structure to make sure that as we roll out this new HR system, we in OHR have the capability and the expertise to manage that system. So we completed that review, and we have also proposed a new organizational structure within OHR that we think will put us in a much better position to manage this new process. So those are some of the things that we have been working on. And one of the points that we've made repeatedly right from the start is that while the approval of the Joint Committee on Employment Relations was critical for the components, for many components of HR design, we took this as an opportunity to take a look at the entire personnel system at this university, including those components that we don't need statutory approval to implement. So when we talk about things like onboarding and performance management, we didn't need a new law in order to take a look at those systems and improve them, but we took this as an opportunity to do that, and we've been working on some of those components as we waited for Joker approval. So as we move forward, Workforce Diversity Plan was issued by the Ad Hoc Diversity Committee a couple of months ago. I'm sure many of you have reviewed the report. It is now being discussed across the campus. We believe our role in the Office of Human Resources, in cooperation with the HR community across the campus, will be to work on implementation of that framework. And if you go through the report, you probably didn't go through it quite the way I did, but I went through the report, and the Office of Human Resources is mentioned 13 times as one of the key stakeholders who will be responsible for implementation. So we are beginning to think about how we will work with the rest of the HR community and the entire campus community on implementing that framework. Employee engagement survey, as many of you know, because you work in the units that report to the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration, the VCFA, we conducted an employee engagement survey a couple of years ago, 2012, across all 14 divisions. We are right now planning for the next administration of that survey, which will occur over the summer. So those of you who are in VCFA units, divisions, will be receiving notification soon about this next survey, and I really encourage you to complete the survey. But we believe we need to roll that out across the entire campus, including in the academic units. So that's something that, and we've already talked to the Chancellor, the Provost, and the Vice Chancellor for Finance Administration about doing this. So that's something we'll do in the future. We've developed a draft set of HR professional competencies. So what does that mean? That's a description of what we believe HR professionals, not just in the Office of Human Resources, but across the campus, description of what we think we need to be good at. And we believe that we need to come up with a shared understanding and agreement on what those competencies are, and then build training, professional development, and a certification program around those competencies. So we've drafted the competencies, and we now need to have a conversation campus-wide about them. And then, as I mentioned, leading to an HR professional certification program. We're also beginning the work on consolidating on human resource policies. One of the things that, again, comes right out of the HR Design Strategic Plan is the need for more integration across the different employee categories. And one of the aspects of that is to develop a set of consolidated human resource policies. Right now we have unclassified policies, we have classified policies. In many cases, we're discussing the same aspects of how we manage our people in two separate areas. So right now we've got some folks going through those policies to make sure that they're updated, and then to integrate them into a single set of human resource policies. And that may sound kind of like inside baseball to many of you, but it's very important that when people need to get information about any aspect of our workplace, that there's a place they can go to, and the information is concise, it's consolidated, and it's understandable. And that's part of what we're doing with consolidating the HR policies. Enhancing HR communication goes hand in hand with what I just said. We need to do some work in the Office of Human Resources on our website. Right now we've got a bunch of different websites, and it's very confusing. So we're going to be consolidating our own website information. So again, when people need to know something, need to find something out, they can do that much easier than they can right now. And then related to what I mentioned earlier about HR metrics, to come up with a standard set of metrics that will be communicated in a dashboard type fashion, so that we're quite transparent about how effectively we're attracting, developing, retaining talent, and how effective this new HR system is. So those are the things. We're beginning to work on some of them, but they're not quite as far along as some of the items that I mentioned earlier. That'll go into a little more detail. So Joker approval. We received the approval in April, and as I mentioned earlier, that was really the last external hurdle that we had to go through in order to move forward on the new HR system. And there were many who were dubious about whether or not we were going to get Joker approval, and we did get it, and we really owe a debt of gratitude to UW System President Cross, our own Chancellor, Rebecca Blank, and also folks who work in legislative relations, because all of them worked in advance of the hearing, held a series of meetings with the legislators to make sure that we knew if any questions were going to come up, if there were any concerns, and that really made the hearing go quite well. So we've got that approval. What does it mean? It means that we can move ahead with certain programs. And I think this slide may not, as I present these, it may be a little different than the way it's organized in your handouts, but nevertheless. So we will be able to move forward with combining our catastrophic leave programs. And What that means is right now we do have programs on the classified side and then on the unclassified side. So if one of our employees is ill and is in need of leave donations, right now classified employees can't donate to unclassified and vice versa. So we want to eliminate that restriction. Future state recruitment program, we now have the authority, which we didn't have before Joker approval, to move forward, as I mentioned earlier, on creating our own hiring system for classified employees. We think this will be a tremendous change, positive change for us to move out of the state system. It's still going to be merit-based. It's still going to require fair and open competition, but we can hire for our own specific positions and not have to go through the state system. This is like a game. I don't know which one is going to show up next. University staff, immediate vacation eligibility, classified staff right now have to wait 2 months, I believe it is. Oh, no, 6 months, I'm sorry, in order to take vacation. Unclassified employees can take it as soon as they earn it. That is clearly unfair to classified employees, and we'll take steps to eliminate that. And I know there are some people who are new here who are going to be happy about that. We're going to have to develop our own employee grievance and appeals processes because the processes that are currently mandated and managed by the Office of State Employment Relations and Chapter 230 of state statutes will no longer apply to us. We'll have to come up with our own temporary employee policy that covers LTEs, project employees, and even unclassified employees because we'll no longer be covered by state provisions. Similarly, come up with our own layoff policy. And we've talked about some of these policies. Actually, some of these policies, we had begun to have conversations with the campus stakeholder groups like governance groups because we originally were going to implement these on July 1st, 2013. But now there's been a 2-year delay, but we still have done a lot of the work on developing the policies. So we're several steps ahead. But we will again engage with our governance groups to discuss these draft policies. Same thing with probation. And a new job title and compensation structure. Right now, our job title structure, we have 1,800 job titles. It's the state government job title structure, and we need to develop a university-specific structure as well as introduce additional compensation flexibility, which we don't have right now because we're in the state system. We'll be able to provide every one of our employees with a living wage. Right now, we cannot do that. Because of state restrictions, we cannot pay our employees who are under the living wage as determined by the City of Madison. We cannot move them up across the board to make sure that everybody on this campus earns a living wage. And that, the word I've used to describe that in the past has been disgraceful. But we can't do it. As of July 1st, 2015, we will be able to do it across the board. I mentioned the applicant tracking system. We can move forward on that. Employee category choice program. What we want to do, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, we want to move those positions that are in the classified service right now that are salaried, exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act provisions. We want to eventually move those into the academic staff category where the other exempt positions are. But in order to do that, we will give those employees who are affected by that, and there are, how many? I'm asking Mark. About 1,300. We will give every one of those employees the opportunity to choose whether or not they want to stay in where they are now, which will be retitled university staff, or move to the academic staff. We can move forward on that. We will provide individual one-on-one counseling for everyone who wants to consider moving so that they understand what the implications of that move will be. Ultimately, as those positions become vacant, we'll move them all into the academic staff, but it's very important to understand we will not force anyone to move. It'll be completely voluntary. And then finally, combine some of our supplemental insurance programs. We have, in some cases, a very confusing assortment of insurance programs. I think we have like 5 life insurance programs. So when we hire a new employee, it's very hard for them to figure out which is the best one. So we want to combine and consolidate some of those programs. So these are the things that we will be able to do as we move into this new system on July 1st, 2015. Now, some of the other stuff that I talked about and will talk about we can do anyway. But these are the things that required statutory approval. So some of the highlights, future state recruitment program, I really think that's going to be a big step forward for us. Living wage adjustments well, I've said what I need to say about the living wage. And of course, we'll work with the governance groups on these other policies with regard to temporary employees, layoff, probation, and grievances and appeals. So these are the things that we now can move forward with the understanding that it's been approved by the Joint Committee on Employment Relations. So there are a couple of things that we still need statutory approval for that are not under the jurisdiction of the Joint Committee on Employment Relations, and therefore were not considered at the hearing. Compensation flexibility, and primarily here, we're talking about the ability to provide performance-based compensation for unclassified employees. We can do that right now for classified employees through the discretionary merit compensation, the DMC process, which as of July 1st, 2015, we won't have to go to the Office of State Employment Relations to get approval like we do right now, but we want to have the same ability for unclassified employees, and we need statutory authority for that, and also to provide classified employees with first-day health insurance coverage. Right now, they have to wait 2 months to get the employer share of health insurance, and we want to eliminate that inequity as well, but we need some additional statutory authority. Last time, these provisions were included in the biennial budget, so our legislative relations people will have to work with their contacts in the Capitol to figure out how to do this. So I want to go through in a little more detail, not a whole lot, some of the things that we're working on right now that we're going to roll out even before July 1st, 2015. And one of them is our new employee onboarding policy. And we have drafted that. We've had conversations with the governance groups, and the governance groups, I know, are in agreement with the policy. Now, of course, the devil's in the details, and we will work out the details as we move forward. But basically what we're saying is we want to have some standardization across the campus in how we treat our new employees. You know, you only get one chance at a first impression, and if you screw it up, it's, you pay a price with new employees who show up and they don't have computer access, they don't have telephones, they don't have work to do, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds like things, they sound like things that should ordinarily happen, but sometimes they don't. So we want to make sure that, to the extent that we can, that every new employee has a positive experience. And we define onboarding as beginning when a new employee accepts a job offer. So even before they show up on campus, we want to make sure that they have a positive experience. So in the policy, we've set out some broad framework components, but basically we're saying that each campus unit has to have its own onboarding program that meets certain criteria. We're going to roll it out this summer, help campus units to make sure everybody understands, we have a common understanding of onboarding and its critical components. I mentioned it starts when a new employee accepts a job offer, and it should extend throughout that new employee's entire first year. So it's more than just a 1 or 2 or 3 day orientation program. It is a comprehensive series of activities and events to make sure that our new employees have positive experiences, and also make sure that the jobs that new employees are in are the right fits. So it includes orientation, it includes having an onboarding contact, somebody we often refer to as a peer partner, somebody who's on the same level of the new employee who can help them figure out stuff. So things that you might not want to go to your supervisor to ask about how things get done around here, what the culture of the organization is, and we've piloted this with some of our senior executives across the campus, and we do it in the Office of Human Resources. People say it really makes a difference to have somebody they can go to on a peer-to-peer basis and not have to worry about, am I making a bad impression on my supervisor, to get answers to important questions. So that's the peer part. And the onboarding contact is actually, I got it reversed. The onboarding contact is somebody who is responsible in each unit for making sure that things that need to be in place for the new employee are in place, so that they have a computer, they have a telephone, they have a supervisor, they meet that supervisor, et cetera. And to have a first day meeting with the supervisor, very, very important. Some of our employees report that they come to work and they don't know who their supervisor is, or they don't meet their supervisor until a week or two later, or they don't have any work to do right from the start. And that's part of the responsibility of the onboarding contact as well as the supervisor. Now, to support the policy, we're going to provide, we already have a training program that's proved to be very popular that goes through the onboarding process and also provides supervisors in particular with resources to make sure they understand how onboarding should progress, and then provides them with things like templates, checklists, conversation guides. So this is something that's very important. We didn't need statutory approval to do it, yet we've taken advantage of the opportunity that we have right now and taken a page, literally, from the HR strategic plan to move forward on this onboarding policy. I know many of you have your own onboarding experiences. I have my own, and we could probably have a long conversation about them. But we want to make sure that when people come to work here, they have the tools, they have the knowledge, and they have the support to be successful. And we think this is very important. Performance management. What does performance management mean? It really means that everybody on this campus, every employee, understands what their job is, understands what the expectations are for doing that job, gets coaching, counseling, and feedback, and discusses professional development opportunities. So again, sounds like something that everybody, that should apply to everybody, but we know that it doesn't. As we've had these conversations in the forums, we've had people raise their hand and said, you know, I haven't had a performance evaluation in 10 years. Well, this is designed to address those issues, this policy. And what we're doing is providing the campus, again, with a general framework. We're not dictating through this policy how individual units should do performance evaluations. We're not dictating what performance evaluation form you should use. What we're saying is performance management, performance evaluation is a process, not a piece of paper. And we want to make sure that each unit has that process in place, but we're not trying, initially anyway, to dictate the details. But we are going to be requiring the supervisors and managers have regular, both formal and informal, conversations with their employees that address job goals and expectations. You know, there's a lot of research that shows that if you ask supervisors if they think the people who report to them understand the job goals and expectations, most supervisors will say absolutely. But if you ask the people who report to those supervisors the same question, you'll get a very different answer. And this is designed to make sure that people have conversations with their managers and supervisors. We're trying to focus on the discussion, on the conversation, not just the piece of paper or the electronic piece of paper that is a performance evaluation. Talk about performance, professional development goals and plans. This should be a regular part of those conversations. The policy calls for an initial discussion between the manager, supervisor, and employee at the beginning of the performance year. And again, we're not dictating what the performance year is. I think most units are probably going to evolve to having it done on a fiscal year basis, but that's up to them. But a documented conversation between manager, supervisor at the beginning of the performance year, and a performance evaluation at the end of the performance year. We're also, part of the policy also called for a mid-year discussion between the manager, supervisor, and the employee, and we're having conversations with the governance groups about whether or not that should be required, or that should be a best practice, or it should be done when either the supervisor or the individual employee wants to have that conversation. But we're trying to establish a baseline so that we can be assured, and our employees, all of you, can be assured that you will have these conversations throughout the performance year. Recruitment assessment and selection toolkit, this goes to the changes that we plan to make in how we recruit, evaluate, and hire new employees, particularly on the classified side, although this also applies to unclassified hires, including search and screen committees. One of our experiences with search and screen committees, it's that it's often about screen, but not enough about search, and that needs to change. So right now we're putting together a toolkit that we will put online, and we'll work with, particularly with the HR community, to develop this that will help us hire people in a more timely, efficient, and effective way. And the toolkit's going to include recommendations about recruiting strategies, about how to evaluate candidates. We're coming up with some new approaches that will replace, in many cases, what we need to go through right now through the state civil service system with civil service exams and the long list that we get and so forth. So more efficient, more timely, but nevertheless continuing to have effective ways to evaluate candidates. And what this will do for us is it'll actually allow us to go out and recruit. Right now, oftentimes we go out and recruit candidates, but there's no assurance that they're going to make it through the process. And we want to be able to recruit candidates and provide them, the good ones anyway, with a better level of assurance that they'll actually make it through the process. Some forms to use to evaluate candidates, a database of interview questions, search and screen tips and tricks, a discussion and assistance on how to avoid unintentional bias, and we'll work with our colleagues in OED to do that. How to set up and conduct interviews, interview strategies, reference checks, do's and don'ts. You know, these are things, reference checks, interviews, that people do across this campus every day, but the feedback we're getting is people want assistance, they want guidance, they want better tools to help them do these things, because really, when it comes down to it, one of the most important things we can do around here is make sure that we're hiring the right people with the right skills and put them in the right places. And of course, we'll also provide training for hiring administrators, and that's our way of saying anyone who's involved in the hiring process, and we're developing those training programs right now as well. Now, this is an area I mentioned, employee choice. We want to make sure, ultimately, that positions that are now in the classified service that are salaried, that are exempt from Fair Labor Standards Act, are moved into the academic staff, where the rest of those positions are. So we have the exempt positions in the same employee category, and the hourly positions in the same employee category. But we're going to go through a process to get there. And that means recategorizing, taking a look at our positions, and then recategorizing them, moving those positions eventually into the academic staff from the classified staff. So the exempt positions will eventually all be in the academic staff. Again, nobody's going to be forced to move, but eventually as positions become vacant, we'll move them into the academic staff, whereas the non-exempt, the hourly positions, will stay in the university staff. But in order to do that, we need to take a look at the classified positions and make sure that they are classified right, that they are either correctly classified as hourly or correctly classified as salaried. And we're going to go through a process, again, in cooperation with primarily the HR community, to take a look at these positions over time. So we've already identified what we're calling FLSA experts in each division who are going to help us do this. We're giving them training actually this week on the FLSA standards, so as they look at these individual positions, they know what the criteria are and can effectively judge whether or not they ought to be eventually in the classified or the academic staff. They're going to lead that process within their divisions, and they'll be talking to the people whose positions are affected, and then they'll serve as the contact for those employees in their division. So there's going to be a lot of technical stuff here. The long and the short of it is we want to make sure that our positions are accurately classified as either hourly or salaried, and then eventually we will move the classified salaried positions into the academic staff. I mentioned the Workplace Flexibility Toolkit. One of the promises that we made in the HR Design Strategic Plan is to create this toolkit which will better communicate than we do now what the workplace flexibility options are and how an employee can request to take advantage of them in a good way. So examples of things like flexible work schedules. We know that there are a lot of people on this campus who already work on flexible schedules, but then there are other people who may not even know that this is a possibility. We may have managers and supervisors who don't know that this is a possibility. So we want to communicate better. Telecommuting, some jobs, it makes sense to telecommute. Other jobs, it may not make sense. But again, we want to make sure that people understand that and we're communicating it. Job sharing and even part-time work. So there, right now, we have a group of folks who are looking across the campus and essentially inventorying different alternative workplace arrangements, and that information will be incorporated in this toolkit, which we'll make available online and also in other ways for people who don't have good online access. And the idea is to increase awareness and increase the adoption of these workplace flexibilities where it makes sense and where the employee and the supervisor agree it makes sense. So I'm going to wind up here and then we'll get into the questions. Some key takeaways. We really based the HR Design Strategic Plan on input we got from the 11 teams that worked on each one of the HR design components, as well as input we got from you and our colleagues across the campus when we had a campus-wide conversation about the draft HR design plan. And we continue to do that through opportunities like this, as well as our interactions with the governance groups and other key stakeholders. We've got a lot going on. We've got a lot of moving parts, not just the stuff that we can now move forward on with Joker approval, but also the other components that we have and continue to already move forward on. Things like the onboarding policy, new hiring process, performance management policy, this thing I just mentioned, the FLSA review and employee choice, this workplace flexibility toolkit. We're continuing and will continue to consult with the campus community, continue to have these campus forums. We'll also adopt or use other approaches like web chats, and continue to work very closely with our governance groups, not just the shared governance advisory group, but also the individual executive committees from the governance groups. We're implementing in phases, as we described. We're beginning to roll things out this summer. We'll roll additional components out between now and July 1st, 2015, and then there'll be sort of a big bang on July 1st, 2015, with the components that Joker approved. We have made some adjustments based on the delay. We talked about that. But we are on schedule to implement all of the components that Joker approved on July 1st, 2015. So thank you very much again for being here today. Thank you for that. And I'm going to turn it over to Harry, who's going to facilitate the question and answers.
So I need to check and see if this is on. Is this on? Okay, wonderful. I guess I'm supposed to be standing here.
It's up to you, Harry.
Well, no, because we have two microphones that David has, and David and Lindsay, I think, are going to be, or Phil, are going to be doing that. But before we move into taking questions from the floor, a couple of reminders. First of all, if you have feedback to give us or questions that you want to pose and you're comfortable doing so using the mic, you're welcome to do so. But we invite you to write down questions or comments on the yellow cards, and we will collect any yellow cards that have already been completed. If you can just hold those up, and then we'll make sure to grab those first.
When are we going to do Terry? After?
No. And Terry? Terry, do you have a couple of words you wanted to be able to say to everyone regarding classified staff governance? Phil has a mic right there.
I don't know if it's wit and wisdom, but I'm on the Classified Staff
Here, why don't you
Executive
stand up,
Committee.
Terry?
Terry Freer, Classified Staff Executive Committee. Another member, Linda Meinholz, is sitting right here. Raise your hand, Linda. There's a lot of things we've been doing since this started not very long ago. We're trying to form committees, that Personal Development Committee, where it's open up for everybody, all classified staff on campus, different Chapter 6 committees, Transportation Committee, diversity committees. And so we've formed a committee on committees, which is looking for people to staff these committees. If anybody's interested in being on any of these or curious about what it's about or what the personal development is, our interim secretary, John Lease, is right here. His phone number is 263-2995. Call him and see what opportunities are there. So we've also been looking at some of these policies already. We've met with our counterparts in the academic staff about the performance management and some of the issues we have with that. So this has been going pretty well, I think, as we're just kicking this off. So now we're having an election for the Classified Staff Congress. There's 106 districts in this Congress. There's a primary elections in some of the districts. That means there's more than 2 candidates running. So if you have one of those districts, you're going to get a ballot and you vote for one, you get it back by June 23rd, and they'll be counted. So then, if you're also, there's a few districts that don't have candidates. You'll be getting a letter at the same time saying there's still opportunities to be involved in this Classified Staff Congress. I urge anyone beyond that, there's all kinds of people who've never been involved before that we want to hear your voices. We don't want you to be the ghosts on campus. We want to hear what you have to say, bring something to the table. So if you're in a district, you get a letter that says nobody's running in your district, put your name on there, send it back, become involved. So then, on June 25th, that'll be on the June 25th, those second chance have to be in. So then on the 7th of July, the ballots will go out for the district, for the district representative and the alternate. And the top vote getter will be the rep, the second vote getter will be the alternate. We're hoping that you'll work together to improve your lot on this campus. Those will be due back on the 21st. And they'll be counted and you'll be notified. The first meeting of the Congress will be on August 18th. So it's a short time period, a lot to do, and let's go at it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Thierry. And again, this is one of the transitions that we're able to make happen now. It's not something that's waiting for July 1st of next year. It's already begun, and it's happening, and this group is working really hard to implement it. So with that, we'd like to just take questions that people have. Any questions from the floor? There's a question back there, Phil. Okay, Sherry.
I was actually an ex officio member of the Ad Hoc Diversity Committee. An ex officio, for those of you who know, that means I went to the meetings and participated in discussions but didn't get a vote. Nevertheless, I was on the committee, and yes, we did have a lot of back and forth, and I think that's why you see, if you go to that section of the Ad Hoc Diversity Committee about recruiting, you'll see a reference to the Office of Human Resources and maybe even a reference to HR Design Strategic Plan. So we do need to work closely, and that's why we've identified that we believe that we will be involved in the implementation, because the framework, the Ad Hoc Diversity Committee made it clear that their charter was to come up with a framework, but not to direct how implementation should occur. So I think that's when we'll be quite heavily involved.
Have another question in the back.
And by the way, I have Mark Lund here with me to answer the hard questions.
You said that you said. Hello?
Yeah, you're on that. I'm sorry, Deb, it went away. Let's try again. No, the mic's not working right now. We'll get Jim. Jim is on it. And while we'll use the other mic.
Hello? Okay.
Sure, Deb.
Did I understand you earlier to say that Chapter 230 would no longer apply to employees in the university?
As of July 1st, 2015, Chapter 230 will no longer apply to university employees. We will still be state government employees, but we have been given the authority to create our own HR system separate from Chapter 230.
Okay, will there be any federal or state laws that protect employees?
Of course, all federal and state laws that apply to employees outside of Chapter 230 will still apply.
Okay. But why is Chapter 230 being moved aside?
Well, it's not being moved aside. It will still exist, but we're being moved out. We and the rest of UW system as well, all 26 campuses, because we believe we need to create our own system specific and unique to our university, that there are provisions of Chapter 230 that really don't apply to a research university. However, I'll give you a couple of examples where we will essentially recreate provisions in Chapter 230. I mentioned one example, which is recruiting and hiring. We will still have a civil service-based system with fair, open, and merit-based competition. We will still, employees will still have just cause and appeals rights. We're not going to become an at-will employer. So we will retain in this new system certain employee rights, but we'll do that outside of Chapter 230.
Thanks. This is related, I think, in a sense, too. How does this plan address job security?
Well, as I just mentioned, particularly for classified employees, we will not become an at-will employer. We will still have appeals and grievance processes. Employees will have due process before they'll have to, will be required to go through a due process system before we can take any negative personnel actions for employees. So by and large, and Mark, I would invite you to talk about this as well, we're retaining the essential employee security provisions that exist right now. Is that correct? And let me make a statement that the law does not require us, for employees hired after July 1st, 2015, the law doesn't require us to have those kinds of protections for those new employees, but as a matter of policy, we're going to extend the same kinds of protections that employees have now to those employees hired after July 1st, 2015, even though we don't have to, because it would be completely wrong for us, we believe, to have two sets of provisions applying to two separate types of employees. So we're going to continue to have the same kinds of employee protections that we have now, even for employees hired after July 1st, 2015.
With regard to employee flexibility, will the work rules for classified employees be revised, for example, schedule of lunch and rest periods?
I mean, I'm going to defer to Mark on the details, but that's not the kind of thing that is in the HR Design Strategic Plan or is going to be part of our policies. That will still be subject to local rules, right? I'm looking to Mark for a nod, and he's nodding.
So another question that's shown up a couple times is, what are the key factors and trade-offs to consider for changing employee categories?
You mean moving employees from one category
Right.
to
So
another?
what are the trade-offs to consider? What seem to be the benefits that would be there going one way or the other?
Yeah, and it's a hard question to answer because it's pretty complicated. There are differences in leave accruals that people are going to have to take into consideration, and there are even differences in leave accruals based on how long you've been with the university. So each person is going to have to understand where they are in terms of tenure with the university and how that would affect their leave accrual. There are also collective bargaining considerations. I mean, right now, we're only able to bargain with one union, trades, but if collective bargaining were to come back by statute, people who are in the academic staff would not be able to participate in collective bargaining, whereas university staff would be. So that's another issue. What are some of the other ones, Mark? Oh, yeah, why don't you?
as far as what governance body that would be representing you,
That's right.
as far as making a decision whether you want to be academic staff or university staff, that's another area. Also, the retirement calculations are slightly different for classified staff and academic staff. Not a big difference. It's just a matter of when you decide to retire, at what point in the year. There are some different calculations that occur. So as Bob's indicating, it's an individual person-by-person decision to look at the various factors and see how they would affect you, and then making a determination from all of those things.
And we'll be prepared in the Office of Human Resources to provide you with that information so you can make an informed decision. And at the moment, we're not sure when that window of opportunity will open up, but when we considered this the first time and we were planning on implementing it on July 1st, 2013, the decision was that once we opened the window, we would not close it, that people would be able to think about this over a long period of time, because it will be an important decision. So we'll provide the information and the interpretation, and again, no one will be required to move. It will be completely voluntary.
We have a question in the back.
Hi, I'm Linda Meinholz. It's actually more of a comment that I just want to point out, if people do choose not to move from classified to academic, any new positions are going to be opened as academic. So you actually won't have any way to promote or change jobs unless you do switch to academic. So I see that as one of the downfalls.
So you see that as a downside of staying in that position or moving?
I actually see it as a downfall, because I have so many years of service that I have vacation that I'll lose if I go to academic staff. So if I lose a week's vacation, that's another pay cut.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm basically in my current position until I retire.
Thank you, Linda. Here's another question that we've gotten from a couple of people. Will domestic partner benefits be included in HR design?
We can't do that, can we? We can't do that unilaterally. That's we're still going to be in the state, in the big state benefits programs like Wisconsin Retirement System and the state health insurance. So we can't decide on our own to do something like that. It has to be part of what the state does.
But if those benefits are extended in the entire state system, then our employees benefit as a result of that?
Absolutely.
Okay. But that's not a unilateral choice?
Correct.
So just to clarify, if domestic partner benefits are extended in the entire state system, then we all benefit from that as state employees?
That's right. We're still in the major benefits programs. So any changes to the Wisconsin Retirement System, any changes to the health insurance programs would affect us as state employees.
But we're not free to do that unilaterally?
Correct.
Can you please explain direct hire, how it works, start date, who is it for? Is it for unclassified, classified, both?
Ken?
So in regard to direct hire, is the question revolving around as far as the waiver program?
What is it and how does it work?
Well, the direct hire, that's basically where we waive the recruitment for various positions, so that there is not a recruitment process and someone can be directly hired into a position. And there are certain areas where certain types of positions or circumstances where we can hire directly without a recruitment process. And this right now is mainly in the academic staff, the unclassified area. And actually we're working on ways to figure that out, how that would work for across the employment groups on campus. And so that's still a work in progress.
But as the HR Design Strategic Plan lays out, direct hire would only be possible under a specific set of circumstances that would be outlined in advance and would require OHR approval. So it's not something that's designed to be applied in every circumstance, only in circumstances where we've all agreed that it would be a positive thing.
Yeah, an example of that would be if someone was in an internship program and went through the entire internship and they were successful with that, that we'd be able to hire them directly into a permanent position.
But it's designed to be the exception, not the rule.
That's right.
It will be designed to be the exception, not the rule.
Question back there. Phil?
I realize that you might not be able to answer this question until you do the rate and title survey, but
Right.
the way it is right now for classified staff, if you are in a certain title, you can only transfer into other pay ranges that are lateral to yours. You can never transfer into a promotion. And for non-broadbanded employees, that also then means that you can't get an increase in your compensation if you move from one position to another. And is that going to be examined and possibly changed in the next one to maybe be allowed to apply for transfer positions in maybe the next level up, so that as your experience and your training grows, you could possibly transfer into a promotion and promote from within?
I don't know if that's the terminology we will use, to transfer into a promotion. But one of the things that we do want to do, that we've talked about quite explicitly in the new job title system, is create more career progression opportunities. So, as I said, I don't know that we'll call it transfer into promotion, but we want to give people reasonable opportunities to advance based on what you described, which is developing through training and job experience additional capabilities. But you're right, it remains to be seen when we do the job title and compensation study. But that's one of the things we'll want to get out of it.
So that's been one of the key components of the plan, but we've had to wait until implementation in order to go forward with that aspect. But this whole aspect of wanting to make sure that people really do have promotional opportunities, that there's a real clear development path that people can identify, that came across really loud and clear, and it's integral to the recommendations of the plan.
Right, and that's not to say that every body and every job is going to have multiple progression opportunities, but we want to maximize that where we can.
Another question back there?
Good afternoon. Sorry, good afternoon.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask a question about living wage adjustment.
Sure.
I didn't hear anything mentioned about wage compression. I know that would affect, especially lower wage workers who might have been here several years and are making just a little bit up living wage.
Right.
And I just wondered if has that been addressed at all, or was that something that's going to be addressed with this policy? Or
Mark, you want to take that one? And we've had more than one discussion about this.
Yeah, we've had many discussions about that as far as elevating people to the living wage, then what happens to the folks that are right above that living wage, that whole compression issue. So that whole area will be looked at as we proceed with our compensation strategies, and looking at that to say, all right, do we need to adjust those workers up to a higher wage as well? And so we haven't come up with a perfect solution with that, but certainly it is on our radar screen to review and determine how we will proceed with that.
And keep in mind that we don't have the authority to raise all wages to the living wage level until July 1st, 2015. So we've got a little time to figure this out. But that is a consideration, absolutely.
This compression issue has come up a number of times. It's a definite concern. Where do trades fit in? Are they academic, university, different category? Where do they fit in?
They're university staff.
And how will the future state recruitment program interact with the current state classified system?
Well, the future state will replace the current classified system because, as we've been describing, the state classified hiring system will no longer apply to us. So we are right now in the process of developing a new system. It'll still be civil service based, that is based on fair, open, and merit-based competition, but we think we can do that in a way that is much more timely and efficient. But as of July 1st, 2015, we will have to replace, and we want to replace, the current classified system with a UW-specific system.
I understand that answer. I think there was something
Harry, you
else.
ask harder questions than they do.
Well, I think there was something else implied in the question.
Okay,
I-
go ahead.
Okay, and maybe I'm misunderstanding
No,
it,
no,
but-
go ahead, go ahead.
But it seems to me that one of the concerns...
Harry and I went to the same, are from the same hometown, by the way. So
Competing high
we have
schools,
these
right.
kinds
We
of
do this,
conversations
right.
all the time.
So one of the things that I think people have raised is, you know, how will promotional opportunities or job vacancies or things like that that show up in the classified system statewide or system-wide, how will those things now be interacting with our system?
Say that again?
So right now,
Please.
when jobs are posted
Yeah.
and you're part of the classified system,
Uh-huh.
that's a statewide thing. We're going to be separate now.
Right.
So how will our system interact with that system? Or will it interact at all?
Well, I'm going to ask Mark, because this is another area that we've had a lot of conversations about.
Well, as far as the future state, the two systems will be entirely separate, but the classified employees as of July of 2015 will get what's called reinstatement eligibility, in which they are able to apply for other state positions and, like a transfer, be able to be considered for those jobs by pay range and by title, and they don't have to take a state exam or anything like that. They can talk with a supervisor and be interviewed and be hired, and so they would get 5 years of that reinstatement eligibility. But as far as jobs, as far as promotional opportunities, those types of things, in another state organization, you'd go through the same process. You'd have to go through the examination process and those types of things. If individuals want to come and work for us at UW-Madison, they'd have to go through our hiring process, which, as Bob points out, will be a civil service type process, but they will not, there won't be the ability to transfer into our system from state government. They will have to apply like like anyone else that's applying for a position on the Madison campus.
Thanks, and to whatever degree we're not answering the questions, please make sure to ask other questions.
Yeah.
And then who will make sure the performance management policies are getting done?
Well, we do need to put in place a system that will allow us to determine the extent to which the components of the performance management policy are being implemented. So we're going to depend on the units to implement the policy, but eventually, and this gets into, you know, another discussion about what kind of technology is going to support this system, we will put in place, and we hope, an automated system that will allow us to determine that employees are having these conversations. We've done that in the Office of Human Resources. We've developed a system so that, as the director, I get literally weekly reports that tell me if mid-year conversations are taking place, if end-of-year performance evaluations have been done, and if beginning of the year expectation discussions have taken place. So eventually, we want to have a system like that for the entire campus. And what we're trying to do with the performance management, since we know that this will be a cultural change for this campus, in many cases, we want to roll out this new policy now and really do training, change management over the next year with a hard effective date, my word, of July 1st, 2015. But the point is a good one, and we are talking about what kinds of technology we'll need to support the implementation of this policy. Now, I've also been asked questions like, well, on July 1st, 2015, how are you going to make sure that every manager and supervisor on this campus does exactly what they're supposed to do? And if anybody has an answer for that, I'm all ears, because we can't do that. But we do believe that we have senior leadership support, and I've been in conversations, including with the chancellor, senior leadership support that performance management, including performance evaluations, are important components. And I believe we're going to get that kind of leadership right from the top, and I think that will be helpful.
Thank you. There are a couple of different questions that have been actually showing up in a few different ways related to workplace flexibilities. So just trying to capture the spirit of that. How will we compel departments that will not implement flex time to do so? Will departments have to justify decisions where flex time is made as a case by an employee? And what recourse would the employee have if they feel like they've made the case for flex time? And if you can also speak to it, there's a lot here, related to second and
There
third.
sure is.
Well, this is coming from first shift, but it's also
Sure. I
of
understand.
concern to second and third shifts.
At this stage, what we want to do is develop and communicate the toolkit. I don't see us in the Office of Human Resources monitoring the use of workplace flexibilities across the campus. I don't think we're going to impose our judgment in individual cases about whether or not employees should be granted workplace flexibilities. At the end of the day, that comes down to decision of individual managers and supervisors in cooperation with their employees about whether or not it makes sense. And there are going to be some jobs where you can't telecommute, or you may not be able to have flexible working hours, and that's really just the nature of some of these jobs. So right now, we're at the stage of we want to make sure people understand what the options are. We want to communicate to ensure that people at least understand it, but it's not my intent to manage this centrally and get involved in individual conversations between managers and employees.
So I understand that it wouldn't be our role in OHR to be centrally involved in all those conversations, and that the case needs to be made in terms of whether it's appropriate to a particular job.
Sure.
What consideration is being given to appeals or other kinds of redress when people feel like they're not getting a fair shake in that determination?
Well, right now, as far as the policies that Bob mentioned, we do have policies where there isn't really a formal appeal process that occurs with those. Certainly, having employees talk with their supervisors and come to some understanding as far as what can be done, what can't be done. But in the future state, that we have had a lot of discussions. One of the things that Bob mentioned was a complaint process, a grievance process for employees to identify concerns, and I would hope that there would be more of an informal resolution before you would get to that point. But there's been a lot of discussion of whether that process would involve these types of things, and I think that's still to be determined.
As we develop that policy. And maybe it's naive of me to say this, but part of what we want to do is make the business case to our managers and supervisors that in certain cases, allowing employees to take advantage in a good way of these things will help improve things like organizational performance, productivity, and retention. And it's the same thing with employee engagement. It's not something that you do as a project. It's something that if you have engaged employees, your organization, your unit is going to perform better. So again, this is a cultural transition to make people understand that these are changes that are going to help the whole organization perform better, but they're not the kinds of things that are going to apply to every workplace situation. It's just never going to be like that.
Thanks. Is there a question back there, Phil?
Yeah, I guess. You know, Terry Frick again. I'm who
Hey,
sent
Terry.
that question up there, Bob, and for a reason. You know,
I'm sorry, say that first part again?
I'm who sent that question up there for a reason. I
Okay.
was at the forums we had last week for the Congress, and I worked 34 years in a slaughterhouse on a line, and you know I never missed one of my kids' programs or sporting events, and yet custodians who can come and then come back and finish their job are denied this. You know, there's places on this campus who are treated different than other places. And until we understand that and we look at it from the Office of HR saying, you know, this is the right thing to do. This is how we improve morale. This is how we retain good help. Because we can't give them any money, this isn't going to be done. You know, and so if we don't get a firm commitment from the Office of Human Resources that everything possible is going to be done for the people on this campus who work with their hands and get dirty and got their hands in toilets or in their hands in cages with dirty animals. This is never going to happen to them. The people who are out there shoveling the snow so you guys don't fall when you come in are the ones who can't get flex time to have a family of their own and to be able to be involved with their family or with whatever they have to do that everybody else takes for granted because they're home at 4 in the afternoon. This is where you guys got to step up.
Well, Terry, we're trying to step up, and I couldn't agree with you more that we need to do everything we can to make sure that our employees have work-life balance and that they're allowed to participate in activities like you just described. But I will also say that I don't believe it's our role in the Office of Human Resources to get involved in individual discussions with managers, supervisors, and employees and mediate these kinds of things. I believe it is our role to try to promote what you just said and what I said, which is I think these things help improve morale, engagement, retention, and performance, and the more that we are able to do those kinds of things, the more positive outcomes like that we'll have.
So another thing that has mattered a great deal to people throughout this project, and they're just looking for some understanding about it, how will sick time and vacation time be influenced by HR design?
Not at all.
Not
I mean,
immediately.
no changes. Those are all determined by state law, and none of that is changing. Huh?
But
well, there are no plans to change. Let me back up and say originally there were some recommendations that we should standardize leave across all employee categories. That was a recommendation by the Compensation and Benefits Work Team. We backed off of that because it became extremely complicated, because there would be people who would think that they're winners and there would people who would think that they're losers. So at the moment, we're not making any changes to any sick or annual leave accruals. We will include that in the compensation and job title study, but until that study is conducted and still recommendations are made, we're not making any changes to sick and annual leave.
But
that's
the
a fair
process
statement?
by which those changes will be considered will be on the other end of that study.
Yes, if any changes are made.
Right.
Right. The one thing that we did mention is we want to move forward on providing classified, to be called university employees, with the ability to take vacation as soon as they earn it, not have to wait 6 months. So that's a change that we want to make. Thanks, Mark.
Another question that's come up here is what happened to the HR Design Professional Development Group's report and recommendations?
Many of them are included in the work that we're doing here. I mentioned in areas of performance management, onboarding, recruitment, and selection, we're rolling out additional training programs. Now, that group, I think, had like 40 different recommendations, so it's impossible to incorporate all of them. But I think the fundamental message of that group that we need to expand our professional development, our training programs, we are incorporating in what we're doing now.
There are a couple of questions that have come up around the theme of communication.
Mm-hmm.
So one is what are we doing to increase communication between HR and blue-collar employees? This person's supervisor didn't even know this meeting was happening today, and neither did this person's coworkers.
Well, you can always communicate better, but we're trying to communicate directly from Human Resources through forums like this. We're doing another forum Thursday night from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., and we find that those forums are very well attended. We're trying to work with the HR community. We're interpreting and translating everything that we do, so our employees who don't speak English as their first language are also involved in the conversation. So, I mean, we can always do better. We tried very hard this time to make sure that the word got out about these forums electronically, but we know a lot of people don't have good online access, so also through announcements and posters, and we'll continue to work hard to make sure that information is shared.
And we have a real commitment to making sure that people are aware of this. We also have staff who are specifically committed to working with UW Communications at this point to make sure that their resources are being well utilized here. But we also count on you, all of you who are participating, whether you're in this room or participating through the live stream. If you feel this is important, then please let others know. Go to the website, download the information, share it with people. Also, we have additional forums later this week. There's a forum on Thursday morning that will be at Microbial Sciences Building, and there will be a forum on Thursday late at night at 11 p.m. at the Health Sciences Learning Center. So those are other opportunities this week. So if you're participating today, please let your coworkers know about these other opportunities.
And in 3 months, we'll have another series of forums as well.
Yes.
I've got just one question here too. I understand obviously that we're going to be state employees and considered still state employees. Now you were talking about us being able to transfer into a different state agency of some sort. You mentioned a 5-year thing. I'm not quite sure I understood what you meant by that. Does that mean where you can be grandfathered for 5 years if you want to transfer from whatever department you are in now with the UW, even though you're considered state, to their position somewhere else?
Sure. Basically, the 5-year reinstatement eligibility is something that everyone in this room has today. If you were to leave the state, you'd get 5 years of reinstatement eligibility to any state organization. So let's say you take a job with American Family, and after 2 or 3 years you decide to come back to the UW, you would be able to what we call it's called reinstate, and it's like a transfer, but it's not a transfer. It's basically you get this eligibility so that you can bring back your vacation allocations, your sick leave allocation, all those types of things. And so when we move to our new HR structure, you're going to get that same 5-year reinstatement eligibility, and so that you can apply for other state jobs and not have to go through an examination process. But after 5 years, you will no longer have that ability. And so I just wanted to point that out. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Well, kind of. So in other words, if I want to transfer, not using transfer, let's say I want to go to a different department of some sort, and that you're saying that I have 5 years to, I don't know if I totally understand what you're saying. I understand the 5 years. If, let's say I go to work in the private sector, I want to come back, I can come back and still be reinstated in 5 years. But are we allowed to be able to, being state employees, without going through all that whole full process of a private sector person going to a state job, with us being in the state, being able to go to another state job?
Yes, you'd be able to go to another state job, but if you're talking about moving internally to the university, you would go through an application process like other folks that would apply for jobs. So if you wanted to go from, let's say, the College of Letters and Science to the College of Ag and Life Sciences, you'd go through an application process, an interview process, which would be more streamlined than we have today, and you'd be able to be selected for those jobs. The reinstatement eligibility really doesn't apply internally. It's more if you wanted to take a state job somewhere else outside of the UW. Like Harry was saying, like the DNR or the Department of Transportation or Department of Corrections, you'd have this 5 years of reinstatement eligibility while you're currently working here at the UW. We would hope that you wouldn't leave the UW, but you would still have that ability if you saw a job that as far as of interest.
So they could just hire you directly without going through a competitive process.
Yes, they could.
Harry?
Sure.
Will university staff positions have broadbanding as the way their pay structures are?
What you'll see, as far as we're calling it that transitional phase when we get to July of 2015, because as Bob mentioned, we're going to be doing a title and compensation study that will take a period of time to complete, and so to get us to the new structure, we are going to be taking the current pay structure that we are under today with the as far as other state agencies and the classified civil service. We're going to use that, but then we're going to introduce a similar concept to broadbanding where we can hire people above the pay range minimum. Right now, for our non-exempt positions, we have to hire people at the minimum or their current rate of pay. We don't have any flexibility in regard to pay. And when we get to July of 2015, we are going to introduce that type of flexibility where we can basically hire people in between the minimum and what's called an appointment maximum. So there will be flexibility for employees to essentially negotiate pay when they're considering a position.
Did I answer that question? Yeah, okay.
Well, what will happen once the study is completed then?
Okay.
Will there be a final process in how that's implemented, or?
Yeah, there certainly will be a process, and there will be a lot of engagement as far as we proceed with that title and compensation study, working with the campus community, working with governance groups to identify the scope of the study, to work through how we get the work done. That's going to be a long process. We want to make sure we do it right and make sure that all the things that we need to do are done. We certainly do not want to go forward and do something that is not a good product, because that affects all of us. And so it's going to be a lengthy process, but there'll be a lot of engagement and discussions about it.
And the study itself will produce a set of recommendations that we'll have to consider. They won't automatically be implemented.
Before I take that question from the floor, I've been holding one for a while. What is the component-based timeline for the project? In other words, what components will be implemented when, and how will that be communicated?
Well, we're trying to do that today because we showed you the components that will be implemented on July 1st, 2015, those components that we needed joker approval from, and there were about 12 of them, so that you can look at that slide. Those components are scheduled to be, in fact, we're required to implement them on July 1st, 2015. The others will roll out sequentially, and we'll communicate to the campus. So the onboarding and performance management policies, for example, we've already had extensive conversations with the governance groups, and we will announce to the campus when we roll those out for campus-wide application. And that will be true of the other components that we roll out between now and July 1st, 2015.
So I want to take one last question. You get the last question there, and I have one thing to say here.
Just wondering if Madison is working with the rest of UW system at all? And will there be any similarities to the two? There's going to be two different ones, correct?
Yeah, they'll be different, but there will be similarities. First of all, we're all going to be state employees, and we'll still be in the same benefits systems and programs. And we've also had continuing conversations with system to try to identify those components that need to be aligned. And one of the things we're having conversations with, for example, is whether or not we should do this job title and compensation study with system, so that we have one study. And we haven't decided that yet, but that's part of the ongoing conversations that we're having with system.
And there will be no transfer or anything, possibilities in between Madison and system?
Yeah,
How will transfer opportunities between Madison and system work?
That would be the same as what I mentioned earlier, that people would apply for positions as they become available and go through the standard interview process and get selected as appropriate.
So I'm noticing that our time too, and just a reminder before we close, that if you can provide feedback to us with those 6-question surveys, that'll be really beneficial. I also want to encourage you to go to the HR Design website. There were a couple of questions about terms like FLISA. There are some plain speak papers that have been put on the site. There will be more that will be getting written over the next several months to try to explain some of this complex stuff that's all around HR. So I invite you to go there and keep on participating, keep on asking questions, and keep making sure that we're answering them. Thank you very much for being here.